911, what is the location of your emergency?
He's here. He's here. He's outside.
Who is outside, Michaela?
My ex. I want protection against him.
This phone call would be the very last minutes of Michaela's life.
What's going on? Michaela, what's happening?
He just shot her.
What happened?
Michaela's grief-stricken mother took over the call.
Where is she shot?
I can't tell, please. Help me, Lord. Help me, Lord. Help me, Lord.
November 15th, 2021. A young woman dials 911, her voice shaking with terror. He's here, she whispers into the phone. The dispatcher on the other end keeps asking questions. More questions, and more questions. Are you sending somebody? The woman pleads. Did you already send somebody? The dispatcher doesn't answer. Instead, she asks another question. Then, gunshots, screams, and silence. The woman on that call was 24-year-old Michaela Carter, and she had done everything right. She had called the police. She had a protection order. She had reported the abuse. But none of it mattered, because 10 minutes before that fatal call, police officers had been standing right there at her door, and they walked away. Before we dive into what happened that night, if you're new to CSI Crime Archives, make sure you hit that subscribe button and click the bell icon so you never miss a case. We cover the stories that matter, the ones that expose how the system fails the people it's supposed to protect. Trust me, you'll want to stay for this one. Now, let me tell you about Michaela. She wasn't just another statistic. She wasn't just a headline. Michaela Carter was a real person with dreams, with family who loved her, with a whole life ahead of her. At 24 years old, she was working hard, trying to build a future for herself. Her mother, Kimberly Jones Mbuyi, described her as a beautiful soul, someone who lit up every room she walked into. But like so many women, Michaela had found herself trapped in something she never saw coming. For about 10 years, she had been in a relationship with a man named James Leggett. 10 years. Think about that for a second. That's a decade of her life tied to someone who, as we'll see, would ultimately take everything from her. Now, I need you to understand something about abusive relationships. They don't start out violent. They never do. If they did, nobody would stay. The violence creeps in slowly, like a fog rolling in over water. By the time you realize you can't see clearly anymore, you're already lost in it. And for Michaela, the signs had been there for years, even if the full horror hadn't revealed itself yet. Let me take you back to April 2020. This is important because it shows you exactly who James Leggett was. His own parents, his own mother and father, were trying to kick him out of their house. And how did he respond? He got violent. He pushed his mother to the ground. His own mother. Then he threw his father against a wall. But it didn't stop there. He grabbed his father's revolver and pointed it at his mother. Let that sink in. He pointed a gun at the woman who gave birth to him. Then he ran off with the weapon. You'd think that would be enough, right? You'd think the system would step in and say, this man is dangerous. He needs to be locked up. But here's what actually happened. The charges were filed, sure. But in August 2021, when his parents didn't show up to court, the charges were just dismissed. Dropped. Like it never happened. This is the man Michaela was dealing with. This is the man she was trying to get away from. Fast forward to July 18th, 2021. It's James Leggett's 27th birthday, and Michaela's family, being the kind, loving people they were, threw him a surprise party. Can you imagine? After everything, they were still trying to include him, still trying to celebrate him. That night, some of them went out to Lower Broadway in Nashville. It should have been a fun night, right? Birthday celebrations, music, drinks, good times. But witnesses saw them arguing. Michaela and James, going at it in public. And then, what happened next is something I can barely bring myself to describe. James Leggett took a glass bottle of Jack Daniels and repeatedly smashed it into Michaela's face. Over and over again. With a glass bottle. Her family said later that half of her face was swollen beyond recognition. She was beaten so badly that she didn't even look like herself anymore. Picture that for a moment. A woman, at what should be a celebration, having her face destroyed by someone who claimed to love her. That's not love. That's not even close to love. That's pure evil. Michaela went to the hospital. She told police she wanted to press charges. She did everything you're supposed to do. She even petitioned the court for a protection order against Leggett. The system tells abuse victims, if you want to be safe, you need to report it. Get a protection order. Make it official. So that's exactly what Michaela did. She trusted the system. James Leggett was charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon and misdemeanor domestic violence. Finally, it seemed like something was being done. Finally, it looked like Michaela might get some justice and some safety. But here's where it all started falling apart. Less than 2 weeks later, those assault charges were dismissed. Why? Because Michaela had a panic attack. She learned she'd have to face Leggett in court, face the man who had beaten her face in with a glass bottle, and her body just couldn't handle it. She had a panic attack and left the courthouse. Now, her family said they communicated her fear to the district attorney's office. They told them she was terrified, but prosecutors said they could only move forward if she identified him in court. So because Michaela was too traumatized to face her abuser, the charges were dropped. The system failed her. Again. But here's the thing. Even though the criminal charges were dismissed, Leggett stayed in jail for violating his probation. And Michaela's protection order was granted by a judge. That order specifically said that James Leggett had to stay away from Michaela Carter. It also said he wasn't allowed to have a gun. Those were the terms. Clear as day. Stay away. No guns. On November 5, 2021, James Leggett was released from jail. He'd been locked up since July when Michaela reported the assault. For months. That's all the time he served. And now he was out, supposedly on a 10-year suspended sentence with probation for a previous robbery conviction. This man had a history. Violence against his parents. Assault against Michaela. Robbery. The red flags weren't just there. They were everywhere, waving frantically in the wind. November 14, 2021. This is one day before Michaela's murder, and James Leggett started posting on Facebook. Vague, threatening posts about how someone with nothing to lose won't care when things get real. When you read those posts now, knowing what happened next, it's chilling. He was telling everyone exactly what he was about to do. He was broadcasting his intentions to the world. And then came November 15th, the day that changed everything. The day the system's failure became fatal. That morning, James Leggett started calling Michaela. Over and over. When she didn't answer, he started texting her from an unknown number. We know now that he was armed with a gun. Yes, the same gun he wasn't supposed to have according to the protection order. And he showed up at the apartment complex where Michaela's cousin lived. Think about how terrifying that must have been for Michaela. The man who beat your face in with a bottle is now hunting you down, calling you repeatedly, showing up where your family lives. What do you do? Michaela did exactly what she was supposed to do. She and her mother, Kimberly, fled to the parking lot of a discount store and called 911. They waited for police. They reported everything. They told the officers that Leggett was at her cousin's apartment complex. The officers went to the apartment complex, but they didn't see anyone matching Leggett's description. So they came back to where Michaela and her mother were waiting. And here's where you need to pay very close attention, because this is where everything went horribly, tragically wrong. Michaela and her mother told the officers about the protection order. They told them Leggett was contacting Michaela by text. They showed them the threatening posts he was making on social media. And they asked, begged really, for the officers to arrest Leggett for violating the protection order. You know what the officers said? They said they didn't have sufficient personal knowledge to arrest him. Let me repeat that. A woman with a valid protection order, showing them evidence that her abuser was actively violating that order, and the police said they didn't have enough to arrest him. The officers offered to take Michaela to night court to swear out a warrant. But Michaela had to go to work. She had a job, responsibilities. She couldn't just drop everything and spend hours at the courthouse, especially when she had already done everything the system asked of her. She already had a protection order. Wasn't that supposed to be enough? Here's something crucial that came out later. The officers never performed what's called a lethality assessment. Metro Nashville Police Department policy required them to do this assessment during domestic violence calls. It's basically a series of questions designed to determine how much danger the victim is in. But the officers didn't do it. They just didn't do it. Instead, they escorted Michaela and her mother back to their home on Vanna Court in Antioch. Both Michaela and her mother lived there. The officers did a perimeter sweep of the house, checked to make sure everything looked safe, and then they left. 10 minutes. That's how long it took after the police drove away. 10 minutes before James Leggett showed up at that house. Michaela and her mother called 911 again. And this is where the 911 call recording becomes absolutely gut-wrenching. You can hear the terror in Michaela's voice when she says, "He's here, he's here." 608, Vanna Court. Now, you would think that a dispatcher hearing that level of fear, hearing that a woman who just had police at her house is now saying her abuser is there, would immediately confirm that help is on the way, right? That's what you'd expect. But that's not what happened. The dispatcher kept asking questions. What's your name? What's the address? Can you describe him? Question after question after question. And Michaela, in the middle of her terror, had to ask, "Are you sending somebody? Did you already send somebody?" The dispatcher didn't answer. She just asked another question. Michaela asked again, her voice rising with desperation. "Can you just send somebody?" And you know what the dispatcher said? She snapped back, "I have to ask these questions for police safety." For police safety. While a woman was being hunted by her abuser. On that call, you can hear Michaela saying, when they pulled off, "He walks up, and he's coming to the door now. He has a gun." She knew. She knew exactly what was about to happen. She could see it coming, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. James Leggett kicked down the door, and he started shooting. He shot Michaela's stepfather 3 times. Michaela watched it happen. You can hear her on the 911 call, crying out in terror as she witnessed her relative being struck with bullets. She kept saying, "Help me, Lord. Help me, Lord." Over and over. A prayer. A plea. A desperate cry from a woman who knew she was about to die. And then he shot Michaela. Twice. Once in the chest. Once in the leg. She was still on the phone with 911 when the bullets tore through her body. The dispatcher heard it all. Michaela Carter died 1 week later, on November 22, 2021. One day before her 25th birthday. She never got to blow out those candles. She never got to celebrate another year of life. Because the system that was supposed to protect her had failed at every single level. Her stepfather survived his injuries, thankfully. But he had to live with the trauma of that day, of being shot, of watching Michaela get killed right in front of him. After Michaela's death, prosecutors charged James Leggett with criminal homicide and attempted criminal homicide, among other charges. Finally, the system was taking him seriously. But it was too late. Michaela was already gone. In March 2023, more than a year after Michaela's murder, the Office of Professional Accountability investigated the officers who responded to Michaela's calls that day. They found that Officer Jason Hees had violated department policy. He had provided deficient or inefficient performance of duties. The investigation found that Officer He should have asked Michaela more questions. He should have attached the text messages showing Leggett's violation of the protection order to his incident report. He should have completed the lethality assessment form with Michaela. And he should have consulted with a supervisor when he learned that Leggett was reportedly suicidal. All of these things, all of these basic steps that could have saved Michaela's life, just weren't done. And what was Officer He's punishment for this catastrophic failure? A 2-day suspension. 2 days. Michaela's mother, Kimberly Jones Mbuyi, filed a lawsuit against Metro Nashville Police Department in November 2022. Her attorney, Daniel Horwitz, said something that really captures the entire tragedy. After her estranged husband beat her with a glass liquor bottle, Michaela Carter did everything that she was supposed to do and relied on the MNPD to protect her. Instead, they got her killed. That's the truth of it, isn't it? Michaela did everything right, and the system got her killed. In December 2023, the family filed a second lawsuit claiming that Metro was only offering to change their policies to protect future victims if the family accepted less money as a settlement. Even in death, even in grief, they had to fight for basic accountability. In February 2024, Metro Council voted to pay $250,000 to settle the wrongful death lawsuit with Michaela's mother. Along with that settlement came some policy changes. Body cameras must now be worn and turned on when MNPD officers are talking to domestic violence victims. Officers are now required to provide information about shelters and counseling. These are good changes, important changes, but they came too late for Michaela. They'll help future victims, hopefully, but they couldn't bring her back. And here's the final twist in this whole tragic story. Remember James Leggett, the man who killed Michaela? On July 4th, 2024, while he was awaiting trial at Riverbend Maximum Security Institution, James Leggett died. He was 29 years old. His cause of death has never been released to the public, so there was never a trial. Michaela's family never got to see him face justice in a courtroom. They never got to hear a jury say guilty. They never got to see him sentenced for what he did. He just died, and all those questions, all that need for accountability, it just evaporated. Now I want you to think about something with me. How many times did the system have a chance to save Michaela's life? Let's count them together. When James Leggett assaulted his own parents and pointed a gun at his mother, that case was dismissed because they didn't show up to court. That's one. When he beat Michaela's face in with a glass bottle, those charges were dismissed because she had a panic attack at the thought of facing him in court. That's two. When he violated his protection order by contacting her and showing up where she was, police said they didn't have sufficient knowledge to arrest him. That's three. When she called 911 in terror, saying he was at her door with a gun, the dispatcher focused on questions instead of getting help there faster. That's four. For times. For clear opportunities where someone, somewhere in the system, could have stepped in and changed the outcome. So I want to leave you with these questions to think about. Really sit with them. If someone you loved was in Michaela's situation, would you trust the system to protect them? Would you feel confident that a protection order would keep them safe? Would you believe that calling 911 would result in immediate, effective help? If your answer to any of those questions is no, then what are you going to do about it? How are you going to be part of the solution? And finally, how many women are we willing to lose before we decide that enough is enough? How many more Michaelas have to die before we fix what's broken? If this case affected you, if Michaela's story made you angry or sad or frustrated, then do something with those feelings. Subscribe to CSI Crime Archives if you haven't already. Share this video. Start conversations about domestic violence in your own communities. Donate to domestic violence shelters. Volunteer your time. Advocate for better laws and better training for the people who are supposed to protect victims. Hit that like button if you think Michaela deserved better. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you're notified every time we post a new case. Because these stories matter. These victims matter. And the only way things change is if enough of us demand it. Michaela Carter should be alive today. She should have celebrated her 28th birthday this year. She should have had a future full of possibilities. Instead, she's another name on a list that's way too long, another life cut short by a system that failed her at every turn. Don't let her death be in vain. Remember her name. Remember her story. And fight like hell to make sure it doesn't happen again. This is CSI Crime Archives, telling the stories that need to be told. Until next time, stay safe out there.